Welcome back to the Grow Like a Mother podcast. Today is super exciting. I have Laura here with me. She is nicknamed the Shamanic Therapist. Laura is a mental health therapist. She's also a spiritual healer, an author, a speaker, and a meditation guide. So, what she does is she blends scientific training and shamanic practices that she inherited from her renowned great grandmother. Laura guides individuals through transformative transformative processes, blending neuroscience, therapy, and shamanism. And she also hosts a podcast. It's called the Shamanic Therapist, which I just recently started listening to, and I love. Laura's been featured on Insight Timer, the Dr. Phil Show, the Voyage Magazine, and a whole lot more. And today we are talking about intuition. So I can't wait to dive in. Welcome, Laura.
Yes, thank you for having me, and especially with one of my favorite topics, intuition. Yeah,
Mhm.
happy to be here.
Oh, it's going to be so good. And I always struggle with like keeping episodes short when I'm really interested in something,
Yeah.
because I could just dive in forever. But I feel like we need to start by grounding the listeners into like, what is shamanism if they've never heard the term before?
Yeah, that is such a great place to start because I think a lot of people have a misconception of what it is. Shamanism is the belief that we can heal ourselves. And that belief is that we can heal ourselves with the things that are on our body, with nature, with your higher power, with your belief system, everything that you were given, you can heal yourself with. And so, the type of therapist that I am is I really want to empower that client to know that they're healing themselves. I'm basically just a guide to help them heal. I'm not advice giving. I'm not telling them how they should live their life. I'm actually helping them connect to their intuition and their selves. The belief in shamanism is that we all have an internal medicine, and that internal medicine is ours to give to the rest of the world.
Oh, I love that. It's like it's the woo version of a lot of personal development stuff, right? Like it's like we've all got this light inside and we can shine and we're here to do something great and blah blah blah. It all connects so nicely, which I love because those are like my two areas of love is like personal development and spirituality. So I'm really excited to have this conversation. I'd love to just like remind people that you are a mental health therapist. So your first, like your day job basically is you're the person sitting in an office across from a mom like me or a mom who's sitting here listening, right? Like you're not, um, so I basically want to let people know like you're relatable. You're not living in the woods and, like being in the trees all day long and going, that's not, you're down to earth. You're right here with us, but you're using tools that are a little bit different than we would normally reach to or maybe have heard of. And it was
Yeah.
cool in your podcast that you did like a whole podcast on explaining shamanism. And you had said that when you poll your or interview or survey your clients each year, the part that they find most helpful is that shamanism part where they have a bit of a hand in it, right? Like they feel that they can take control. And I know as someone who's gone to therapy for many years, that's a huge tool that you can bring and just keep in your arsenal forever, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that when people are given access to their subconscious or their psyche, and they're learning how to access this part of themselves on their own, it is so helpful. Talk therapy. I believe it's good in some cases, but it does have its limitations because you're really just going into the conscious mind. And whenever you do the shamanic work, you're taking a deep dive into the psyche or the subconscious, and that's where most of our wounds and our hurts and pain lie, is in that subconscious realm. Yeah.
It's so hard to make changes there on your own unless you have the training, right? Even people like me who have a lot of knowledge and education and experience working with the subconscious mind at a non-clinical level, right? Just like in a layman's kind of level, who understand and use it day to day and practice lots of different techniques. It's really hard to do it by yourself. And so, I mean, how do we Oh God, where do I want to start? Because I have so many questions. I love the way you explain things. Let's start maybe by just what is intuition, first off? Like, what would you consider our intuition to be?
Our intuition is our inner voice. It is what we can listen to that is within ourselves. And sometimes things are in alignment with us, and sometimes things are out of alignment. And I know that your podcast is geared towards mothers, and mothers have a beautiful intuition. And sometimes our intuition will go against what society says or people that we really adore and care about in our life say. But we just know, we just have this inner feeling that that's not our truth. So I really do believe that intuition is our truth. It is that voice inside of us. It's our soul, basically. In shamanism, it's listening to the spirit of ourselves. And, in shamanism, there's a belief that we all have been given the highest authority of ourself if we listen to it. And that alignment is so important. I meet with mothers a lot. And a lot of the time, since they are so busy and they have kids and they have their own career and they have their husbands and they have all of the other social things that they do, clubs, activities, groups, schools, all the things, sometimes it's really hard to listen with all of that noise around them. And so silence is a really great way to access the intuition, even if it's just 60 seconds of, I'm just going to wake up like 5 minutes earlier and get like 60 seconds of silence. What you're doing is you're laying down that relationship with your intuition so you can give it space, so you can listen to it more.
I love that. That's exactly what I tell people on where to start for finding intuitions. Like, get quiet because intuition doesn't need to be loud. It's the truth. It doesn't need to yell to get your attention, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you need to create the space to be able to listen. And when we say listen to our intuition, I almost feel like it's feel our intuition. Because for me, intuition doesn't come as like an audible voice that I can hear. Intuition comes as a feeling and a knowing. Like it's audio, it's like like a cognizance almost, right? And so are there different ways that different people tune into their intuition, or is everyone like me where it's more of like a feeling and a knowing, and sometimes like a physical, like I'm really in tune, and so I have physical cues that I recognize now, which took time to build up. But I'm just curious, like, is that for everyone or is it different?
Yeah, I think it's for a lot of people. We just feel it's that inner knowing that you talked about. I really like the practice of journaling as well. I think, especially automated journaling, which is just journaling without a prompt or without direction. You're literally just putting pen to paper and you're just writing and just seeing what comes up. There's a really great book called The Artist Way, and she talks about it as a brain dump where in the morning when you get up, you just start writing and seeing what comes out. I love accessing intuition that way through writing. Another way is through validation of self. I had a mother one time, and her family, they booked a trip to go on a cruise. And 2 days before the cruise, she had this intuition and she's like, we don't need to go on the cruise. And I don't know why, and I've done so much planning and my kids are looking forward to this trip, but I don't want to go. Well, guess what? She canceled, and that cruise I don't know if you heard about the Carnival cruise that like had a very disastrous, there was flooding on the boat. Like it
Oh
was,
my God.
and she told me, she's like, oh my gosh, how did I know? I said, intuition is powerful and
Yeah.
it's powerful. So validating, even if it doesn't make sense, just having that inner knowing and giving it validation. I'm going to follow this just because I just feel like it's not right for me or it is right for me. That helps our intuition grow even further.
And for just to give an example of like smaller steps too, like that's a big decision. A lot of people, when they're first trusting their intuition, might struggle with canceling a whole trip for their family. Like that's a big deal. But just to give an example, it doesn't have to be that big. You have opportunities like this throughout your day. I got a really beautiful white blanket for Christmas, and I was sitting down, I had it all snuggled up, I was watching show, and I had a glass of red wine, and I was like, and it wasn't just like, oh, I better not move this in case I spill the red wine. It was like, no, I need a different blanket right now, right? And it can be as simple as that. Things that you might think are just logic or, like just passing thought, but it can be your intuition's way of speaking to you. And the more you listen to it, the more it talks and the louder it can get, right?
Exactly. I love that you said that because I even think about intuitive eating
Mm.
and um, thinking, I'm really like craving some leafy greens right now, or that's something that just sounds so good to me, like a fresh avocado. Really listening to that inner voice. It's really listening to your body and allowing your body to be held and listened. But I think you're absolutely right. The more that we validate it, the louder that intuition gets for us.
I just came up with this thought that I'd love to hear your opinion on in talking to our kids about intuition, because I often will talk to my kids and say, like, listen to your body. What is it telling you? And they're getting good at it, but I want to see, like, if someone hasn't started this practice with their kids or with themselves, like, what's some really easy language we can use to encourage our inner child, ourself, or our physical actual kids to start this, because what a gift for them to be able to take this on their whole life with them, right?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I think one of the biggest keys is in mindfulness,
Mm.
of being mindful. If you teach a child, and of course yourself as well, to listen to the sounds of nature and to be very present with what you're doing in front of you and be mindful of the way you grab things and be in the present moment with a project that you're doing, you start to instill that voice inside of you because you're paying attention. So I think with small kiddos, starting with mindfulness is a really great way to go with intuition, because you're just training them to be present with life. And if they can be present with life, more than likely they can be present with self and what their inner voice is saying.
Right.
Um, Also, something that's coming to me is giving them permission to speak that inner voice, and I have my best friend, and she's got 3 kids, and something that I love she tells her kids is, hey, if there's anything that you hear about at school, or maybe you hear from friends, ask your dad and I, like, talk to us about it. And if there's something you don't feel right about, just talk to us about it and we can work through it all together. And I love that because it's giving them permission to just give a voice to something that doesn't feel right, or
Yeah.
maybe they something that doesn't align with themselves. So empowering that small inner voice can happen by giving them permission to talk about it.
I love that. I love that. And giving yourself permission to talk about it too, right? Or at least honor the thought, right? Where's this coming from? Like, get curious with the intuition. I have a spiritual healer named Kim, and she always is like, get curious. You just get curious about it. I'm like, yeah, it's true. Um, so I'm curious, what does the journey, like, what does a shamanic journey look like? How do you guide your clients through this? Like, we can heal ourselves. We know what we need. We have everything we need. When someone's sitting with you, what does that look like? What's the experience?
That's a great question. The first thing that I always want to make sure they have are coping skills or emotional regulation skills. So the breath is really where we start. I mean, truly, the way that we breathe is the way that we live our lives. If we're breathing in a very fast, stressful way and we're going from thing to thing, I liked on your podcast, you talked about the squirrel archetype with
Yeah.
the mom. I love that because I could think of so many times where I was a squirrel, right? Or so many times I've known people that way. And so the squirrel archetype probably has very fast paced breathing, right? And it's going from thing to thing to thing. And so training people how to breathe and breathe slowly and deeply, and to take something I like to call the sacred pause by Tara Brach. She talks about the sacred pause. And the sacred pause is just allowing yourself to have times throughout the day where you're just taking a breath of air and allowing yourself permission to slow down. So I always like to start with the mechanisms of the breath. And we talk about coping skills, like how can you cope with the things that are going on around you? What are the things that are really stressful in your life? I'm a drawer sometimes, so I like to do a diagram of the stressors versus the things in the person's life that fills their bucket up or makes them happy or brings them joy. And then we look at the balance, like, do you have way more stressors than things that give you joy? How often have you connected to the things that give you joy? So being able to be in balance that way is really important. And then I really, what's important in my work is doing an inventory of what your day looks like. Sometimes I'll ask a client, just walk me through from the time you wake up to the time you go to sleep. What does an ordinary day look like? So I can get a snapshot of what you are looking at, what kind of life you're living, what kind of lifestyle are you living? Are you drinking water? Are you exercising? Are you laughing? Are you dancing? Are you singing? These are really important concepts because sometimes people just want to go straight to pharmaceuticals and go into, let's just get on something because something's not right. But really, sometimes we just need to do an inventory of what is out of alignment with my intuition, what's out of alignment with my highest truth right now. What can I do in my life that is going to put me more into alignment with myself? So that's kind of like the starting point of where I go with a new client.
I love that. I love that. Are there tools that you like to offer? Like, do you have favorite books? You mentioned The Artist's Way. Are there any other books or podcasts that you tend to recommend or that you love that you can share with us? I love finding new things, so it's kind of like a selfish question, but just curious.
Yeah. It's a very simple read, but it's a very powerful read. I really love The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz.
Yeah.
Very popular one. I'm sure most people know that one. I also like any literature by Ram Dass. I'm a huge Ram Dass fan. They've also created all of his talks into a podcast called Be Here Now.
Oh, that's good. Thank you.
It is awesome. I also like Brené's Brown book, Daring Greatly. I like anything by Dr. Joe Dispenza. I love that. My background is in neuroscience, so I tend to blend neuroscience with the work that I do. So his books just make a whole lot of sense to me, and they're just very empowering as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And the nice thing, I am not in any way a science whiz. It was one of the subjects that like confused me, made me scared. I shied away from. I'm not strong in science, but now in my adult years, I find neuroscience specifically is something that keeps coming into my world with different people I meet or different podcasts that I listen to. And so I'm really interested in the idea of neuroscience. I wonder if there's like, how do you bridge the neuroscience and spirituality or like the idea of us having more autonomy than maybe we're led to believe, that body-mind connection? Like, can you just speak to a little bit on how you incorporate the sciencey part and like the spiritual part together?
Wow, yeah, I love talking about this.
Yeah.
Um, there's so many different ways, but I'll just kind of give it because I could talk about this for hours. One of the ways that I like to merge neuroscience and spirituality is by the construct of our belief system, right? And I'm going to bridge shamanism. I'm going to get a little weird right now,
Good.
okay?
Yeah,
Uh, you're like, I like it. I can tell you like that.
totally.
So in shamanism, we have an illuminous being, which is our aura, our energetic field. It's been labeled many different, names, but in shamanism, it's called the illuminous being. And it's also the eighth chakra. So, we have our seven chakras, and then the eighth chakra is the envelope that leads to our luminous being.
Mm.
And in that luminous being are our illnesses that we carry, belief systems that we carry, any family emotional wounds that have been generational, carry those in there. And so neuroscience talks about how it's almost like what we think we create in our life. And it's the aspect of physics is everything that is created is going to mimic that vibrational energy, and it's going to come upon you, right?
Yeah.
So it's basically this idea that we've created our own reality by our thoughts, and that is neuroscience. the way that shamanism goes in with that is there's a belief that the fingerprint of your luminous being just creates more of that, right? So, for instance, I had a client one time and she said, I have been rejected my whole life. I've been rejected by men, I've been rejected in opportunities. And she said, I don't understand why, because I show up and it's nothing that I'm doing, consciously, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm rejected. And so we started talking about her birth, and she told me that her mother had rejected her as a child. And even in utero, she did not want her. And so she took on that energetic field of rejection. And then the more that she was rejected, the more she believed, I am going to be rejected. This is going to happen to me.
Mm-hmm.
So she is creating this life story by her on her own, and doing some subconscious action too, like, she would self-sabotage relationships and do all those things, those actions. But in your luminous being, you're creating that energetic force of creating more of rejection for yourself.
Mm.
And so that goes in line with neuroscience, because we know that when we change our belief system, when we change our thoughts, our life begins to change.
Yeah. If you
Because,
try it, you will see it. It
yeah.
happens.
And, I really love something that I have a certification in is cognitive processing therapy, CPT,
Okay.
which has been used for trauma. And it talks a lot about how your belief system creates your actions, which create what happens in your life.
Mhm.
And so I love how spirituality and shamanism really does dovetail the neuroscience of this happening in our lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So cool. It almost lends, I love that when we can talk about them together, the science and the woo, it almost lends this air of like permission to people who are interested, but have been told or made to feel like, oh, but that's not real, you know? So when you can back it up and pair it and complement it with neuroscience, it is so much more accessible to people. And I think I love that you're bringing this work to sort of like mainstream because it's going to allow more people to be exposed to it, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And to be a little bit more specific, there's an area in the brain called the reticular formation. And if I am hyper focused on rejection all the time, then I'm going to just notice when somebody even slightly, I feel like somebody even slightly rejects me, and I'm going to hang on to that. It's just like if you're trying to buy a new car and you're looking for a black Honda Civic, you're going to notice every black Honda Civic on the road.
Totally.
So yeah, so that's just we're creating the story for ourselves when we have that belief system.
Yeah. Where did you learn about shamanism? It is your great grandmother, right? Tell me that story.
Oh, it's so interesting. So I was actually already into shamanism when I learned about my great grandma. I went on a trip to Costa Rica by myself, and I was around 19 years old, and I was eating at a restaurant. I was flirting with the waiter. I tend to be a little bit of a flirt. I'm a Libra, and and I saw this note on a tree, and it said in Spanish. It said shamanistic work with this couple. And I was laughing with the guy. I said, should I go see this couple? And he got really serious, and he was like, yeah, you really should.
Oh,
And I thought, okay. And he said, I can take you there. I get off of work at 4. And I would know, Jill, I'm not the type of woman that's going to be like, okay, I'll just come with this random stranger.
yeah. Yeah.
Let him take me to a house in the woods, not a good safety precaution, but something in intuition. My intuition told me I needed to go and I could trust this guy.
Yeah.
So I went, and he protected me the whole time. I had an incredible experience. What I saw was a big, bright peacock. And it was an amazing experience. It was a spiritual awakening. And ever since that day, I just knew that I wanted more. I wanted to experience more of it. And so I went back a couple years later and actually lived with them for some time, and they taught me what they knew, and they wouldn't let me pay them. So I just stocked everything they had, like their house with food and everything. So I learned, that was my starting point. And then a couple years later, I'm telling my grandma what I do for a living, right? And she said, you're my mom used to do that. And I said, what? And it was this huge, like, cathartic awakening that this has been in my genetic line. And it made sense why it felt so right and so good to my intuition.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's so cool. That's so cool. What an awesome story. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you.
You
I
too.
mean, I love following you on Instagram and listening to your podcast. Can we just share with everyone who's listening? If you've made it through this episode, this is your jam, just like it's our jam. So where can we get more of you online?
Yeah, thank you for that. So my Instagram is DFW, like Dallas Fort Worth Spirituality. And my website is theshamanictherapist.com. I also have a podcast, like you said earlier, and it's called The Shamanic Therapist. And I'm new on that, so I so far only have 2 episodes recorded, but bear with me, I'll continue to record. And then on my Facebook is DFW Spirituality. So you can find me on those platforms.
And do you do virtual work? A lot of my listeners are sort of scattered throughout North America. Do you do virtual work as well?
I do. Yeah, I do virtual. A lot of my clients are virtual. In Texas, I, of course, use my licensure. I'm an LPC. But if they just want to do solely shamanic work, then I can work with them outside of Texas.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank
Yeah.
you again, Laura, so much.
Thank you so much. It was great talking to you, Jill. And thank you for the opportunity to be on today.
Absolutely.